Welcome to the Digital Day podcast from Bailiwick Express and the JP. In this episode, James Jen speaks to Hannah Gleave and Aaron Gavey from Ports of Jersey.
The obvious place to start really is what Ports has in terms of ambitions for the next 5 years and how digital feeds into that.
I guess we've just finalised our 5-year strategic plan for the business for Ports of Jersey. As part of that plan are lots of ambitious investments into our infrastructure, so increasing capacity and resilience at our port at St Helier, and also a master plan developing the airport to look at increased connectivity and future-proofing the assets at the airport.
So yeah, I guess digital is really going to help us unlock a lot of resource, time to spend it on the right kind of stuff. We've got lots that we want to do in terms of the master plans that Aaron mentioned, but also things like growing connectivity and huge improvements in our customer experience. So if we can spend more time out there with face-to-face interactions and less time on the back office transactional stuff that we can digitise and make better decisions based on the information that we can get, then why wouldn't we do that? That's what's going to keep us moving into the modern age.
And how does that approach fit in with the technology Ports is looking at now, for example, say day-to-day operations?
Yeah, so probably a good example of that actually is an in-train project we're looking at is developing and mobilising an operations centre at the airport. So at the moment we have a really well-developed operations centre for Coast Guard at the harbour, using lots of integrated technologies and data feeds coming in and out of the room for decision making on the spot, particularly in search and rescue examples. So we're trying to replicate that kind of environment at the airport to help with that seamless passenger journey, have kind of one version of the truth, and really start to harness information and data and get to know our customer a bit better. So that's a really good example of something we're doing now to harness technology.
Yeah, I guess something that we learned a lot through creating the Marine Operations Centre is working a lot closer with our business partners as well. So with the Airport Operations Centre, we'll end up having some of our business partners in the room with us. So when people move from their home into departures and then all the way to the gate and onto the planes, they'll come across different business partners as they go, but they may not realise that they're dealing with Swissport or, someone from WH Smith or someone from Jersey Pottery. And what we want to do is work really closely with our business partners. So we've got information for the whole of the journey. So we know if there's like an incident that happens in the middle in the terminal, sometimes it can take us a while to get the right people there because we haven't got complete oversight of the whole journey. But by creating this one place where we can have data from all of our systems and our business partner systems, it will really help us in making that journey smoother.
Right, and certainly with the island's main ports, you've got the airport and the harbour, technology, I imagine, quite vital.
Yeah,
and I guess the other point is we're not kind of reinventing the wheel. So a lot of the things we're looking at are things that are proven in the sector and airports. So a good example of a solution that might help us work closer with business partners, a community app. So something that, although we'll have an operations centre kind of overseeing operations, actually everyone on the ground through the airport itself will have access to information via apps on tablets. So that real-time information is at people's fingertips, and that supports the customer. If there's queries, we can provide the information as quick as possible. So
fair to say it's customers and staff as well. I guess technology plays into their sort of day-to-day duties.
Yeah, so I guess in that example, the objective is ultimately kind of an improved customer experience and passenger journey experience. But in order to do that, we need to support our own teams to make sure they are using the right information at the right times, really. So
yeah, I guess we've always used technology to support our businesses. So we're all very much used to dealing with handheld radios to speak to each other from across the terminals. But whereas, like what Aaron said, where we're moving to is having like technology on tablets or on a phone where, as soon as EasyJet decide that there's going to be a delay, that we can get that information straight into our operations centre and send it out to every single person that works in the airport community, and then everyone knows what the situation is. Whereas sometimes at the moment we've got situations where, EasyJet will make a decision. It can take a little bit of time for that to trickle through to us. Sometimes the customer might get it a few minutes later. So if we can make some of this stuff work better, you can kind of see how, quite quickly it'll be like, oh, we don't need the radio anymore. We've got something way more handy.
Sure.
Yeah.
And how do we compare? It's probably hard to say with other jurisdictions. I know as far as our harbour and airport goes, it's smaller than some other places, but our technology is fairly up to speed.
Yeah, I think we've probably got a bit to learn from kind of wider sector experience. So certainly we're not kind of early adopters on some of this stuff, but I think we've been working closely this summer with BDO locally, who have supported us in creating our 5-year roadmap for our digital ambitions and objectives. But as part of that, we've been working with teams from Heathrow on a kind of larger scale example, but also Antwerp, so the Port of Antwerp in Europe, who are really at the front edge of embracing technology and leveraging that really to improve operations. So.
Yeah, I guess I think we don't do too badly for the scale of organisation that we are in terms of, we'll definitely probably more advanced than some, but there are other places where, like Aaron said, we're going to learn a lot from and take the best bits. Sure.
And if there are companies out there, maybe they want to use technology more so than they do already, or maybe they don't really at all, what would be the advice, certainly, from what you've done with BDO, what would be the sort of tips you could give to digitise?
So I think there's a few things there that we've learned over the last few months, really. Firstly is you've got to get your foundations right. So I think something we've got a real opportunity to harness as Ports of Jersey is getting to know our customer better. So treating customers in their own right and based on the experiences that can be personalised to them. And in order to do that, we really need to understand the way we use data. So kind of as a really foundational objective is really getting to understand how we can use data in a more efficient way, in a more productive way. Then there's some kind of more technical aspects, like do we transition to a cloud-based kind of system as a business, and how we manage our software and our infrastructure and architecture. So there's definitely a kind of evolution to this, I think, is the way to put it. That being said, we've also looked at kind of hero projects, what we've been coining hero projects, in terms of those opportunities to really kind of sell the potential really for digital.
You give a few examples of those?
Yeah, so across the piece really, we talk about the maritime supply chain, so kind of getting the goods in and out of the island. In Antwerp, a much larger scale port, but so much similarities in the way that they support the business partners and the sharing of data. And some of that is even using drones. So having drones fly around the port to understand and pick up information. So their case study was emissions. So, understanding and monitoring emissions from ships. So not only does that, it's an automation of a process, but actually it's really useful for sustainability and understanding the impact of our operation to Jersey. And
I know Jersey's going to be a bit of a test bed almost for drone trials, testing their capabilities and I suppose safety, things like that. How far away do you think Jersey is from seeing that kind of technology?
Yeah, I mean, actually, we're probably a lot closer than many places in the world, because there aren't many places like us where we operate both the harbour and the airport. We also have our own regulators, and we have our own aerodrome. So we have a huge amount that we, as an island, as much as just Ports of Jersey, have control over, and we can be a really great trial base for some companies who want to try and do different things and advanced technologies. And we're already having lots of conversations with people and starting to undertake some work, which helps us not only in terms of digital and modernisation, but certainly in terms of creating a more sustainable business and a more sustainable way of living.
Definitely, and I was referring to the Elias project, I believe it's called there. Is that one you guys are going to be watching fairly closely?
Yeah.
Yeah, that is a really good opportunity, as Hannah says, to kind of really sandbox Jersey. So Jersey has some really kind of unique opportunities there, in that we can drive regulatory change to keep up with the pace of evolution and technology and the way we use digital solutions rather than kind of be held back by it. So the Elias project's a really good example of using Jersey as a test bed, really.
I think I've been lucky enough to be on a couple of calls with some of the guys that are working on the technology, and like it really blows my mind. Like it's hard to keep up with the complexity of what they're discussing, but when you see how they can kind of use drone technology, perhaps for delivering, parcels to and from island to island, the way that they can use technology for safety reasons to keep separation between drones and, other things that might be in the airspace. At first, I guess because it's such a new area, it feels a bit like, is it safe? And I wouldn't want to be the first to be near it just in case it isn't. But actually, when you understand a bit more about how it all works, it is like unbelievably safe. It's actually removing so much human error out that it's really clever. So like learning things from what they do and then thinking about how we can apply it to other areas of the business is also really cool.
And in terms of potential uses, I imagine drones is probably quite a good one because you've got supply chain logistics, search and rescue, I think you mentioned earlier. Is there quite a wide spectrum of ways we could apply that particular technology?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, it's one of those, either like the use case drives the solution, or actually once you've got a solution in place, you understand how much more potential there is. So I think, for example, some of the things we've been looking at, even like on the aerodrome within the boundaries of the airport fence, is monitoring. So we do think monitoring the amount of birds and wildlife there is, obviously from a safety perspective around the runway. So at the moment, people basically drive around every day looking to see what's happening. There's a really good opportunity to use drones to do that. We've recently used a drone to survey some of our buildings after the storm to understand storm damage, to kind of look at areas that are kind of a little bit out of sight and out of mind. So that was a great kind of opportunity and a really good example within our operation. But then you're right. So I think in a part of the Elias stuff early on, we were looking at examples of where it's been used elsewhere. And actually, I think in COVID, I think it was the Isle of Man, where they were delivering medical supplies via drone across the water from the mainland to maintain their resilience in terms of supply chain. So it's already out there, and it's great to think that Jersey can be a part of that.
Definitely. I think you were saying you've obviously spoken to a lot of the guys behind that project. It's quite an exciting one. Jersey, I think, as a test bed, not just drones, are we quite a good location, do you think, to trial new technology in general, particularly when it comes to our harbours and airports?
Yeah, I mean, I guess like one of the things that we've certainly learned over this year as we've been putting together our 5-year strategy is kind of like what Aaron said about there's foundational work that we need to undertake. It's not going to be a case of, there's all this new tech, we're just going to buy it and then everyone will know how to use it. There's actually a lot that we need to do in terms of, development of the IT infrastructure, for example. But meanwhile, we also really need to focus a lot on building really strong relationships with our business partners, getting more comfortable sharing data. At the moment, I think just like a lot of businesses, we'll be working on the data that we've got available to us. But, when we start really looking at our operations and what information is available, it's like, actually, the stuff that we've got isn't that useful. What we really need is what they have and what that is. And then how can we pull that into some sort of, system or data lake, and then, be able to very quickly have it on a display screen that not only is in the operations center, but is on all the handheld devices. And then immediately you can move from, where you've not been able to make a decision for 30 minutes after an incident to making a decision within 5 or 10 minutes that's even better informed. So,
there's some context there around turning kind of what we've been coining recently, and I mentioned the operations center and developing that as a way of working, is turning from very much kind of reactive to proactive. So kind of using this information to plan ahead and anticipate, particularly in an airport environment, kind of disruption. So whether that's weather delays or, the inbound aircraft slightly delayed, what does that mean to the people waiting to take off? And the way we've been calling it, terming it, and this is work with Heathrow, is kind of plan on plan. So if everything's working great, it's kind of working great. But actually the minute there's something that happens that's slightly more dynamic or a bit of kind of out of left field, actually that's when you really see the opportunity to predict and react quicker.
And where do you think passengers will see that the most? Is that more sort of mobile applications, that sort of thing?
Communication. So how do we keep the passenger informed is really key. I think understanding where they are, when we talk about passenger journey physically through the airport. So through check-in and, security, and then into departures, and then before they go to gate. At any one point, how do we make sure that people feel informed? How do we make sure that their experience is something that fits them? So we talk about profiling of customers, and someone might travel for an airport 3 or 4 times a year with a different profile. So they might be a family member, they might be traveling for business, and they're probably going to have different wants and needs, or turn up at different times pre-departure. So a lot of this is dependent on using information which we can harness, and we can understand how to profile those people through the airport in particular. And then you're right, in terms of disruption, at what point do we tell them, can we predict in advance, give them a bit more information around the context of what's happening?
And I appreciate you said we won't see everything all at once, but what are some of the other examples of big projects or collaborations with technology that you're currently looking at the moment?
Well, I guess, talking about the airport operations centre that's currently just in the early stages of forming, like we said before, about bringing in our different business partners and the kind of information and data and the resource that they have too. I think so much of this is about helping people to have choices. We absolutely know there'll be people that, don't want to use their mobile phone to check in, or they'll want to turn up at the airport, see somebody at security, go through, have a cup of tea. There's also a lot in the future. There's a huge amount of change coming in terms of like the aging population. So digital's got a huge part to play when it comes to how, at the moment, I don't know, about 10 years ago we had 4 people for every person that was retired. Now we've probably got nearing on sort of 3 to 2 people working for every person that's retired. In about 10 years' time, we're going to have 2 people for every person. Then soon it's going to go to 1 to 1. And if we don't use that, like digital technology, to help us become more productive and free up people to do the relationships, the humanity side of how we want to live and travel, then we're going to really miss a trick, because we'll still have too many people in the back office and not enough kind of working on the stuff that really matters.
And do you think AI, obviously a big topic at the moment, is quite key there? Because obviously automation of, I don't want to say mundane tasks, but sort of routine things that, as you say, if AI kind of steps in, maybe frees up people to go do the human work, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. So like before, when we were saying that as soon as we can, instead of sitting down looking at 17 different emails and pulling together stuff off information screens that are all separated, if we can pull that all into a system and that within a few seconds it's already analysed it and given us the key bits of information, a decision can be made so much quicker. At the minute it might take us, 5 minutes to somebody, feels unwell in the terminal. It might take us 5 minutes to get some help to them. Whereas when we've got better systems and better information and better oversight, it'll be more like 1 minute. I don't know, that's a great example, but you might have some more.
So a few of us visited a aviation forum recently, which was kind of looking at digital transformation in kind of the aviation and airport sector. And one of the it felt like the least shiny kind of examples was something they were using, which was augmented AI. So basically airlines, if you ring an airline up to talk to someone about changing your booking, you're still talking to that. It's almost kind of still face to face or voice to voice over call. It's still a person you're speaking to. So I think there's still we've got to make sure we understand that in terms of, again, back to the kind of requirement of our customer, of our passenger. People, I think, still want to talk to people or be face to face in an airport with someone. But actually, if that person has everything at their fingertips, because you have a AI bot in the background reaching for the information and the solutions, actually that's really powerful. So it's kind of this concept of augmented AI, I think, would be really useful for us. And I think you're right. In order to improve our customer experience, we do need to look at productivity and efficiencies kind of, internally, back of house, if you want to put it that way. And that leverages that capacity really to then focus more on kind of what we're doing right and how we can support a passenger. We've talked a lot about managing disruption and managing it from an operational perspective, but actually there's a really big opportunity around seamless experiences for people, for example, you book a car park space in advance, but actually at that point it gives you an opportunity to get an offer on duty free, or then.
And if you can book that in advance, you can just pick up your bag once you've got through security. You don't have to spend time looking, and then you can book your champagne to be at the bar, or like.
That's what you. Yeah, so I think that's that we've got to think of it in different ways, but what that all comes back to is how we harness data, how we use data in a more integrated way as a business and with business partners, and actually across the island as a community. So working with Digital Jersey and the other kind of companies that we're looking at the moment, there's some workshops with Digital Jersey about understanding, some of the other Jersey Electricity, Andium, some of the other organisations. What are the bits of data that we hold as organisations? How can we use that, make it public to the islands, and look at it from a wider kind of community perspective as well.
And whether it's AI or other forms of automation, I appreciate you said it's about efficiency at the end of the day. Do you think it's quite there yet, or are we looking at maybe another 3-4 years before that kind of tech is really easily applicable? You can integrate it into your own systems. Is that one that we have to keep an eye on maybe over the next 5 years?
Personally, I think we're already on catch up. I think
really okay
in terms of the way that so we talk about things like ChatGPT, and that's quite a thing at work at the moment because people are really starting to understand how to use it in a positive way, in a productive way, but beyond the kind of novelty aspect of it. Like I said, there's heaps of so we talked about so we've just had a big project to install next generation security equipment in the airport, which is based on a regulation and a deadline in terms of upskilling the technology and advancing the technology. Actually, those machines are machine learned, they're AI based, so the more in the mobilization phase, the more that they were used, the more they were understanding how they were used themselves, which helps with less rejection rates or baggage and things like that. So it already exists as a technology. We just need to understand back to kind of the use case, really.
Right. And I appreciate that's a deadline that's airports across the UK, that's not just for Jersey, but hopefully not too much catching up to do. Are we, fairly sort of close to other jurisdictions?
Yeah, well, I think actually in terms of the security equipment, we kind of, that was a strategic kind of decision to get ahead of the game, really, because otherwise we'd be in the waiting list against other airports, much larger airports may add across the UK. So that's been a really good example of maybe early adopting, really, by definition. So
there's obviously been teething problems as we've introduced the new tech, and our really lovely security officers who ultimately are often in quite a stressful environment when there's large queues and things. But again, we can use what we want to do next summer is have a different experience to the summer that we've had this year, and some of that is going to be through the different ways of working that we're introducing at the moment, some of which is pulling together different technology that we haven't had all in one space before, that's going to help us, better manage the real peaks that we see, because, every airport has, very quiet times and then suddenly very busy times. Airline scheduling is something that we could probably do with the airline scheduling to use AI and to help support to smooth that out but I mean ultimately it's airline, that's not under Ports of Jersey's control. We fall into slots that the airlines require.
Sure.
So
but in terms of modelling those, I appreciate there's other technology there. I have to mention the digital twins, I think. Is that for the harbour and the airport?
Yeah, so I think that's kind of so the opportunity around digital twins, which again, Digital Jersey have been looking at on a kind of island-wide basis, really, already. So how do we kind of develop a digital twin of our operation, of our airport, of our harbour, to predict, what changes in environmental conditions or changes in, frequency of aircraft, or basically any kind of dynamic, how that impacts response, and how can we develop and test things through a digitized version of our operation before we have to kind of react to it in real time, basically.
And that might sound a bit futuristic, I guess, for some people, but what realistically does that look like? Is it sort of a 3D render we're talking about? Or
Yeah, so I think, ultimately the first thing for us is, because we've got really big opportunity because we're developing and the infrastructure at the port and at the airport, so now's the opportunity to really put all of the mobilize all of the equipment you need. So it's all based on sensors and 5G and like networking and stuff like that. So we're not retrofitting it because we're building new infrastructure. So we've got a really good opportunity to get that all in. And you're right, it's kind of the way that Digital Jersey have done it is all based on where the data is coming from, actually. So the sources of information, the source of the data that we pull together and kind of create a digital twin, as it happens. So it's everything can be done in feasibility, and kind of you can really start pulling levers on the way that you operate to understand how that's going to impact things in real time. So
so we've seen how it works in Antwerp, and it is literally like somebody walks into the office in the morning, there's screens that show a digital picture of the entire harbour estate, and immediately you can ask the system, how's today looking, and it'll be like, well, the weather's doing this, but also you've got 10 freight movements out, 20 coming in, we've got these berths that are ready, we recommend that these ships move into these. Like it's all just like, it's incredible how Antwerp have pull together the amount of relationships, really, to start off with, to make all of that work well, and then have these operation centres where you can literally, and that's where the drone technology comes in. Like Aaron was saying before, a sensor will go off saying, we're detecting some pollution in this corner of a harbour, and then, obviously they're a different size to us, but they're like, shh. Then a drone, takes off, then hovers over, looks down. They can identify that it's likely to be coming from this tanker, and then they can deploy, people to that area. It's just amazing.
And that's a good sort of morning scenario, I suppose, of how it's being used. And again, how far is Jersey away? Really, in terms of 2 years, 3 years from that kind of situation.
How. The scale of Antwerp, it's one of the biggest ports in the world. So, we'll pick and choose what's right for us. But, how far, yeah.
I think so we built a 5-year roadmap. So our digital journey, if you like, is starting from kind of now over a 5-year horizon. So I think when we get to things like digital twins, obviously that's got to overlay with our other plans around the development of the infrastructure itself, rather than kind of retrofitting it. So I think kind of within the next 3 to 5 years, I think we'll be leveraging this kind of technology. And
we did mention the storm very briefly earlier. If you take it to the extreme, having a digital twin, I suppose maybe models bad weather events at the harbour, that sort of thing. Is there potential there as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So even things like sea level rise, storm surge, kind of working with the Met teams and how that impacts our infrastructure around the shoreline and the harbour itself. So yeah, that's a really good use case, actually.
And if you were trying to sum up how technology is going to position ports in, maybe we'll go with the 5-year plan, if you mentioned it, any key areas, if you had to pick 2 or 3?
I guess for me, we've talked a lot over the last kind of few minutes around the technology and the advancement in innovation. But the other things I've kind of learned a lot over the last few months is that it has to be done for the customer. So ultimately, what is your end goal? And this is about customer experience for us. That's kind of ultimately where we want to leverage the opportunity. The second thing is ensuring that our people are skilled and ready and kind of in what we've been phrasing digital mindset. So we need to understand that our people are up for this and they understand themselves how AI might help their own kind of department or function.
No point having the tech if you can't use it, right?
Ultimately, yeah, that's kind of that has to go in train with the development of the tech itself.
Yeah, I guess. And before, as we were embarking this year on developing our digital strategy, it was, I think we were quite nervous about, because ultimately our workforce is a sample of the population of the island, and how many people are really up for changing technology and embracing it, and there's quite a lot of fear around the use of it for all different different types of people. When we did a survey of our workforce of, how up for it are you, actually like 80% of people were up for using more data and more technology to support them to do their jobs. And that was like, I don't know, I guess I was a little bit surprised at that at first, but I suppose it doesn't surprise me in some ways, because quite often, people that are on either the early adopters or the most sort of fearful are the people that you hear the loudest. But actually, there's a really huge chunk of people who are like, yeah, I'm up for using a bit more, but, I kind of want to see you do it first. And, it's how do we develop a strategy that's going to help us take some of that fear out, make sure that people are ready for it, and that we've got the right relationships in place, particularly, with the airport community, the maritime community, and the whole island, actually.
Fantastic. We'll have to check back in 5 years and see where we are. But thanks for coming in, guys. Really appreciate your time.
Thanks
you.
A lot.
Nice one.
Thank you for listening, and thank you to our Digital Day partners, Deloitte, Digital Jersey, JEC, JT, Ports of Jersey, and System Labs.